want to tell you a story of the Queen's Challenge. A long time ago, in a land far, far away, there ruled an old wise king over a vast kingdom. The king knew his life was nearly over, and he needed an heir to his throne. He had a lot of sons, 300 million sons, but not one of them was married. Now there was a very wise and beautiful queen actually, who ruled the adjacent country, and she had only one daughter. But this daughter was the smartest, the kindest, the most talented, beautiful young woman in all the land. Now the old king spoke to the wise queen. He said, "I want your daughter to marry one of my sons and rule with him over my entire kingdom." Now the queen replied, "Let our kingdoms be joined as one, and let them be ruled by your son and my daughter. But let the very best of your sons, the smartest, fastest, and strongest, be the one to marry my daughter. Let there be a race to my castle. The first of your sons to reach the room of my daughter will win her and the kingdom. But your sons must be careful, for there will be many challenges and difficulties to test them, dangerous challenges." The king praised the queen for her wisdom. "You have spoken well, wise queen. I will tell my sons at once." The king called his princes and told them of the queen's challenge, and they all agreed it was a mighty fine idea. "But be aware," said the king, "there are many dangers and difficulties, and only one of you will survive. I will do everything I can to help each one of you, but in the end, only the very best prince will make it. He will marry the princess, and shall rule over the whole land with her. The race will begin tomorrow at sunrise. Come here again before then, and I will give you special items to take with you, which you will need on your journey." So early the next day, the princes gathered at the king's palace before the sun came up. Now to every man he gave an iron sword, a sapphire shield, a map of the queen's palace. He gave them bread for food, and last, he gave them all a golden key. So the princes set off at a fast pace, 300 million men, each with the earnest desire and determination to win the prize. Over hill and valley, meadow and stream, the adventurers raced on, and finally, after many days of toil and endurance, they arrived at a large mountain. Now they knew that the queen's castle lay on the other side of the mountain, but the sheer cliff face in front of them was too high and too steep to climb, and many miles to go around. The only way forward was to go through a dark and dangerous tunnel that passed through the mountain to the gate of the castle on the other side. Now some of the princes hastily hurried into the tunnel without thinking, but there was a dangerous trap to keep thieves and murderers from entering the queen's kingdom. She had planted a strange vine which grew on the ceiling of the tunnel, and it excreted a strong acid. Now this acid rained down on many of the princes who were making their way through the tunnel, and only those who were careful to hold the king's shield over their heads survived the passage through to the queen's country. So the princes who made it through, they passed over the land after they came out of the tunnel, and they quickly came to the gate of the queen's castle. Now fortunately, the gate was open, because for 2 weeks every month the gate is locked and no one may enter. But luckily it's open now. So relieved at the perfect timing of their arrival, the princes entered into the gate. Now some were faint with hunger, and they realized that their body had need of sustenance, and they stopped to eat of the bread the king had gave them, and they were strengthened to continue their journey. Now others, they were thinking themselves strong enough to continue without eating, And they did just that. They continued in their haste, not stopping to eat. Now soon after this, they came to a huge body of water. And this is a lake that the queen had made, and it was 16 kilometers long. Now the princes all dived in and they started swimming. And after 4 or 5 hours, exhaustion and the freezing cold began to take its toll on the princes. And those who did not eat the bread at the gate, they soon ran out of energy and they couldn't swim any further, and they died, they drowned. But those who did eat, they managed to make it to the other side of the lake after hours and hours of swimming. So as they reached this shore, they wearily climbed out of the lake and clambered up the stony beach. Now, they came from this great victory only to find themselves facing a tall and wide wall with 2 openings on either side. Now the princes who still had their maps consulted their maps, and they followed the directions the king had given. Those who had lost their maps in the lake, or they were in too much of a hurry to investigate their map, they picked a tunnel at random. And those who chose the wrong tunnel never came back. Inside the correct tunnel, in this case the one on the left, it was very dark. So dark that the princes could not even see an arm's length in front of them. They cautiously moved forward, sometimes walking hunched over, sometimes having to crawl on their knees as the tunnel became narrower and harder to navigate. Then all of a sudden the tunnel began to increase in height, when suddenly the men began to feel sticky threads catching them on their face and on their body. "Giant spiders!" one of the princes screamed, as he and all the princes were completely engulfed by huge sticky webs. But there were no spiders. Instead, there were huge glowworms that had made silken threads. And as the men screamed, the glowworms all lit up, and the princes, stuck in the thick ropes, momentarily stopped their struggling as they caught sight of a small door at the distant end of the tunnel. The king had prepared them for this, and those who had held the king's sword in their hand as they journeyed were, with renewed energy, able to cut away their entanglements, and wrenching themselves free, they began the furious dash down the tunnel toward the door. Millions of princes had been lost on the journey, and only 200 remained on this last leg of the race. But they were all determined to win, and they ran with all the strength they could muster. They knew that the door was the door to the room of the queen's daughter, and the first to enter through the door would win the princess and the 2 kingdoms. So the brave princes pushed themselves even harder and faster than all 200 of them, to the very end of their strength. Some thought quickly and pulled from their pockets the key that the king had given them to open the door to the princess's room. And as they raced on, one prince began to take the lead. His breathing was fast and laboured. His heart was beating with such intensity it felt like it would rupture. His legs burned with fire, and every tissue in his body ached with the exertion. But his mind was focused on one thing. He must reach that door. He must win. He must win the race. He must win the princess and the kingdom. It was for this very race, for this very moment that he was born. He must win. Summoning all the strength that he had and putting the force of his whole being into his stride, the prince thundered forward. Nearing the door, he put forth his hand in which held the king's key, and with superhuman effort, he made the final lunge. With one motion, the key slipped smoothly into the lock, and turning it, the door swung open, and the prince crashed into the room, the door slamming shut behind him as fast as it had opened, in the defeated faces of his brothers. The queen sat with the princess before him. He had made it. He had won the race. the hand and the heart of the princess and the approval of the queen were his. That very day, a new kingdom was born. Now you might find this was a fantastic tale, a fantastic story, but actually it is a true story, believe it or not. And it had a happy ending. Well, actually it's still in progress, but it is a true and wonderful story because it is your story. It's all of our stories, in fact. The prince that won the race to the daughter's room. That's you. You're the prince. The king is your father, and the queen is your mother. The princes are the male gametes, spermatozoa, and the princess is the female gamete of your mother, the oocyte, the egg. In the father's, shall we say, the deposit that he makes to the female, to his wife, to your mother, there are 300 million sperm, and they all race to fertilize the ovum of your mother. Now if you remember back to our story, the gate to the queen's palace, well, that's the cervix of the uterus, and this is only open during ovulation, so from day 14 to day 28 approximately, the last 2 weeks of the female's menstrual cycle. This is when the gate is open, and otherwise for the day 1 to day 13 the gate is closed and the cervix is blocked actually with a plug of mucus which prevents any sperm or anything actually to enter into that area. And so if the princes, or if the 300 million, or the ones that actually survive the tunnel, if they come to the gate and it's closed and they cannot enter, they end up dying. So they have to, the very first challenge is they have to get to the gate at the right time, otherwise they're dead. Now the tunnel that's just before the cervix, the one that went through the mountain, you can use your imagination to understand what the tunnel I'm talking about is, but this has a pH of 6.5. It's quite acidic, and it's designed like this with a pH of 6.5 to kill microorganisms like bacteria or other pathogens that would gain entry into this area. So it's a defense mechanism, but at the same time it's also a problem for the male soldiers to have access through to the gate and to the city. But fortunately for the male soldiers, even if they passed through that unprepared, they would die. They would all die. But remember, only the ones that had the shield were the ones that lived. And this shield actually is provided by the father in the form of seminal fluid, which has a pH of 7.5, so it's slightly basic. So you have a slightly acidic environment that would otherwise kill the sperm, but fortunately most of the sperm are protected by the seminal fluid, which has a basic pH and neutralizes the effects of the acid. So that's the first obstacle. Sorry, the gate was the second obstacle. This is the first obstacle that the soldiers overcame. Then they had the gate, and they reached the gate at the right time, and they entered into the castle. Now, remember when they were at the gate, they ate the bread, the king's bread, or some of them ate the king's bread. Now this is analogous to the mitochondria that you can see in the sperm. It's just below the head of the sperm in the neck, or called the midpiece. And this is what gives the male gamete the energy to swim. Now some gametes produced by the father have defective mitochondria. And if they have defective mitochondria, they cannot produce the required energy to make it the long journey before them, and they are weeded out. They die. So only the ones that have functional mitochondria will make the course of the journey. In other words, those who have the king's bread. Now the 16 kilometers that they swam, that huge lake, that is the proportional length of the journey each gamete must make. So, obviously the female cervix and fallopian tubes are not 16 kilometers long. The around 16 centimeters actually, but in proportion, if the sperm or the gamete was the size of a man, he would have to swim 16 kilometers. So proportionally, it's a 16-kilometer swim. I don't know if anyone of you have swum 16 kilometers before. I don't know, even swimming maybe 1 kilometer will be a challenge for some of us. But these little guys, they have to swim the equivalent of 16 kilometers. It's a lot. It takes hours. It's a lot. Now, at the end, you can see here they swim from. We have the tunnel, then we have the cervix, the entrance to the uterus. Then we have the uterus, and at the head of the uterus, we have these two openings that open up into the uterine tubes or the fallopian tubes. Now this is called the oviduct. So you have an entrance to the right and you have an entrance to the left. Now usually only one tube, uterine tube, will have the egg, the ovum. Now the map, remember the map that the father gave to the sons, this is the analogy of the innate ability of the sperm to navigate through the uterus. First they have to, this is a simple drawing here, but in the uterus there are folds and crevices and tunnels and all sorts of obstacles that the sperm have to navigate. And getting through all that that journey, that, what do you call it? Getting through that difficult journey is a feat in itself, and it's amazing ability of the sperm to somehow, without a brain, swim in the right direction, swim around all these obstacles and over these mountains and lakes and valleys, and then at the end of that journey to choose the right tunnel to go down. Now obviously this might just be a 50-50 chance, you might go the wrong way, you might go the right way. However, it also might be an innate ability for the sperm to know which way to choose. And some of the sperm, when they choose, obviously if they choose the wrong fallopian tube, they're going to come around here and then they're going to find their egg and they're all going to die. There's no way back. So only the ones that only the ones that make it through the journey to start with, and then at the end of this long exhausting swim, then choose the right tunnel, only they will have a chance at survival. Now remember when they entered into this tunnel, it got really, really small and difficult. This is like the passage down the fallopian tube. It's quite narrow, and there's a lot of obstacles here also, although it's not as bad as the cervix, as the uterus. But when they come through this tunnel, eventually they find themselves in this glowworm web, as you like. It's a thick coagulation, and this is formed by clotting proteins in the seminal fluid. So it came with the sperm in the seminal fluid, and it clotted. Now this is here for a reason. It's designed for the purpose of allowing the sperm to stay or to remain up in the uterine tube, or even up in the head of the uterus, because otherwise, if it's just all free flowing and thin liquid, that is going to flow all the way out. They're going to fall all the way out again. So it's there to keep them, to maintain the progress that they've made already. Now the problem is, they've maintained their progress. They've got to a place where they've maintained their progress. It's like they've climbed up a set of stairs and they've made it to a landing. However, it's also inhibiting them from progressing. So they're not going to fall back, but at the same time, they're stuck in this clotted proteinaceous fluid, and they cannot progress, they cannot advance. Now, amazingly enough, God has imparted with the seminal fluid enzymes. You've heard of PSA, like when a man goes and gets his PSA levels checked for prostate cancer. It's protein-specific antigen, and it's this and other enzymes in the seminal fluid that break down this coagulin, these webs, the spider's webs. And this is what I made the analogy of the sword with. It enables, in effect, the sperm to cut away the coagulation that's around them and to advance forward down the tunnel. Now remember when they were going down this tunnel and they had a last burst, a last effort to make it to the winning prize. When they all started running really fast and they all started putting all their soul and all their heart into the race. Now this is actually a real event. It's called capacitation. Now this is when the sperm, they're coming. Remember there's only 200 left or even less now, and they're all in this final cut, really close call to make it to the doorway or to the egg first, and they undergo a physiological change. The tail of the sperm that starts to beat faster, so they start to swim faster. They start to apply more energy, more force. The head of the sperm, the membrane, it undergoes a transformation and it begins to prepare itself to fuse with the egg, with the oocyte. So you can see here we have the acrosome and the head of the sperm, and the tail and the membrane. Now all these, they undergo these changes during capacitation as they near the end of the race. Now the golden key, if you remember, that the king gave to his sons, this is the vesicle on the top of the head. You see this is called the acrosome. This is in effect it's a like a pouch containing enzymes that break down the shell of the egg, of the ovum. So once it's undergone this physiological change to its membrane, its tail's beating faster, it's racing for the door. When it gets to the shell of the ovum, the egg shell you might say, the golden key is this acrosome, which it fuses with the membrane of the egg, and it releases these enzymes which break down the shell and allowing the sperm to penetrate the egg and to enter. And of course, the door slams behind the female gamete, the oocyte itself. As soon as that first sperm has entered into its cytoplasm, it undergoes a physiological change, and in effect it hardens the shell and it prevents any other sperm from entering in. So the door slams shut on all the other competitors and they die. So only one has made it. He's the winner. He made it out of 300 million. So there's 3 lessons that I just want to point out from this physiological example. You were in a race. This is you. This true story of the male prince who made it to win the hand of the female princess. That is you. You were in a race against 300 million other gametes, and you beat them all. You are the best of 300 million competitors. You are a true champion, really. God designed this process so that defective genes would be weeded out and only the best would survive. Now, you have sperm that are immotile. In other words, they can't swim properly, or they have other physical and genetic dysfunctions, like they don't have the proper mitochondrial function, or maybe their membranes don't have the ability to undergo the changes necessary to fuse with the egg. The acrosome doesn't work. All these functional and physiological characteristics about the sperm that wins has to be perfect, and it has to be the best. And you are the winner. You are the best. Can you imagine? 300 million other competitors, and you won the race. You won. You're the best. So if someone tells you that you can't do something, if you think that you can't do something, if you tell God that you can't do something, just remember, you are the winner of the very first contest of your life. 300 million competitors, you were the winner at the very start of your life. You won. The Lord said unto him, this is unto Moses, who has made man's mouth? Or who maketh the dumb or the deaf or the seeing or the blind? Have not I the Lord? The Lord made you. He created you a winner. So that's the first lesson. You're a winner. From the very first, from the outset of your life, you are a winner. I don't know any races today that involve 300 million people. That's like the whole US having a race. I don't know any races like that, and if there was, the one that won that race out of 300 million, he would be, or she would be, one magnificent person. Well, you're that magnificent person. You are amazing. Now the second lesson, when you began your very first journey, from the very start of your life, God supplied you with everything you needed. He gave you a sword, He gave you the shield, remember, to protect you from the acid in the tunnel. He gave you a map to know how to navigate the tunnels, the journey through the uterus. He gave you a key, He gave you bread, He gave you everything you needed to finish your first race, and to finish it victoriously, triumphantly. Now in the same way, God will give you everything you need to finish to triumph over the battles you face today, over your spiritual challenges, over your relationship challenges, over your finance challenges, everything. God will give you everything you need. Being confident of this very thing, that He which has begun a good work in you will perform it until the day of Jesus Christ. So the King gave His sons this equipment to fit them and to equip them for the race, to win that first race, and that's great. But Jesus doesn't just do that. He doesn't just give you something at the start and leave you to it. He is with you every step of the way. He will perform this provision for you, the provision of your needs, your every need, every day of your life, every moment of your life. He is there for you, giving you everything you need all along the way. And the third lesson that we can learn from the amazing journey, the amazing Queen's Challenge, is that the design of DNA, the design of your organelles, your cells, your tissues, your organ systems, your hormones, your nerves, your vessels, all this complex, extremely complex machinery that harmoniously and effectively provides the conditions for life, this all demands a designer. You're not an accident. You're not the result of random mutations and natural selection. You're not the result of millions of years of progression from slime to scientist. You are created in the image of God, by God. Now think about what happens when two lovers, they come to get married. The Bible says that the man shall leave his father and his mother, and the two shall become one flesh. Now Paul in Ephesians, he calls this a great mystery, the two becoming one flesh. And he also said how much even greater mystery is the blending of Christ and the church, right? But he was saying from the start that two become one flesh. How is this? How can two unique and sometimes very different individuals ultimately blend together and become one? Well, if you think about it, this is exactly what happened at the very start of your life. You had the male gamete from the father, that's the sperm, and the female gamete from the mother, the oocyte. They fused to become one individual organism, one being, one person. It's a great mystery how two can become one. Now when we think of this mystery of two becoming one, conception isn't just fertilization. It's not just the physiological process of an ovum or an egg being fertilized by a sperm. It's much more than that. It's not even just the creation of a new living organism. It is two becoming one, a new living organism. It is that, but it's so much more. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. Just like marriage is a miracle, how two unique and individual personalities can blend to become one. So at the very start of your life, two very different cells blended to become one. You are a miracle of God. You are, from the start, you are an amazing winner. You vanquished 300 million other competitors. You are under the constant watch care and vigilant provision of the God of the universe. And you are not just a conglomerate of cells. You're not just a fertilized egg. You are a miracle. You're a son of God, a daughter of God. You are a beloved child of the God and creator of all things. From the moment of your conception, you are unique, you are special, and you are loved. Never forget that.